My name is Cierra Hypolite, and we are here to talk about mystery and adventure in middle grade. I'll be your moderator for today. Just to let you know a little bit about me, I'm from Jreije, Louisiana. I currently teach 7th grade reading and writing in Dallas, Texas. So we're going to do quick introductions real quick. So, Fleur, would you like to start off?
Yes, so I'm Fleur Bradley. I'm the author of Midnight at the Berkeley Hotel. So this is the cover. I love mysteries, and that's pretty much what I write. I got my start writing short stories in mystery and sort of segued into middle grade, and I'm just loving the genre and look forward to talking about it today.
Melanie?
Yeah, I'm Melanie. This is my latest book, Every Missing Piece, which has a strong mystery theme that's set in North Carolina. And I'm interested in talking about this topic. It's a really fun one. Thanks.
Brianna?
Hi, everyone. I'm Brianna McDonald. I'm the author of Pepper's Rules for Secret Sleuthing. I grew up loving mysteries and adventurous stories, so I'm really excited to share mine today and have a conversation with everyone about the topics.
Awesome. And George?
Hi, everyone. I'm George. I'm a Lebanese-American author. I write middle grade spec fiction with kind of mystery twist. I don't have a cool book to flash right now, cover forthcoming, but my novel is Shad Hadid and the Alchemist of Alexandria. It's forthcoming in fall 2022 with HarperCollins. So very excited about that.
Awesome. Okay, so just to break the ice, let's just start off with a simple question. So, what sparked your love of mystery and adventure, and why did you choose to write this genre? George, do you want to start us off since this is like your debut novel and you're kind of new to it?
Oh, God. Yeah, sure. I, ever since I was a kid, loved it when stories subverted my expectations. So it wasn't necessarily the mystery so much as the plot twist, the payoff at the end. So the more subtle, the better for me. So whatever I write, whether it's, sci-fi, fantasy, contemporary, it's just that little mystery element that keeps you thinking throughout the whole novel and pays off at the end. That's what I love. Whether it was Star Wars or SpongeBob, anything that could surprise me, that was where I gravitated, and that really won my appreciation. And so I wanted to reflect that in my storytelling. I wanted to show kids and adults that, stories really take us to places we don't expect to go. And getting outside of our comfort zones is a good thing. And I feel like mystery novels and mystery elements in novels always seem to do that for me, and I wanted to reciprocate that. So that's kind of where I developed my love for it. And I just am in awe of folks who can pull it off on a larger scale, and so I just aspire to that.
Okay, what about you, Brianna? You wrote Pepper's Rules of Secret Sleuthing. I read the synopsis on Goodreads, and I was really into Nancy Drew whenever I was a kid, so it really caught my attention.
Yeah, I always loved mysteries for the same reasons that George shared, just how they keep you thinking and keep you on your toes. But I think part of what I love about mystery and adventure stories too is the plot twist and the thrills that you get to incorporate into it, because you get to remain in this contemporary setting, or at least Pepper takes place in the real world in a contemporary setting, but the stakes get to be at this higher level. You get to kind of push characters to the limit in this fun way that's fun to explore as an author, but then I think really pays off for readers as well, because you get to see the characters really go through a journey themselves, that they're discovering things about themselves along the way. The mystery's not just who done it, but also what does this mean about me? What am I learning about myself as I collect these clues along the way?
Yeah, awesome. What about you, Melanie?
Well, I was a big fan of this series of books called The Three Investigators when I was a kid. It's an Alfred Hitchcock series. And there was these three boys that would just solve all kinds of mysteries. They'd be on vacation and find pirate treasure, or they would rescue some dog from somebody's backyard and solve a murder, So there were interesting things happening. And so when I got interested in middle grade and started writing that, one of my favorite books was When You Reach Me by Rebecca Stead. And this is one one of the best mysteries I've ever read. Like, if you know what happens, don't spoil it for anybody. But it has like one of those turns at the end that just reorganizes everything you just read in your mind, and you're like, oh man, that's what was happening, and it really blows your mind. So that appeals to me. So I try to do that a little bit in my books.
Hey, Melanie, you've given a little bit of feedback. Like, you're kind of going in and out just a tad, but I did catch all of that.
Okay.
Yeah, you try to put the headphones.
Okay. And Fleur, what about you?
I kind of caught the bug for mysteries as a kid. When I was younger, there wasn't YA. So, and I was such an avid reader. I'd read my way pretty much through the whole library section on the kids side with anything I wanted to read. And a very nice librarian said, well, why don't you try Agatha Christie? So that's where my first love for mystery came in, just the over-the-top characters a little bit, the plot twists, and it kept my mind going, trying to figure out who committed the crime. And that's, I think, as a writer, also half the fun is, you have to give away some clues, but you cannot give away everything. So it's that balance of how much do you give away and how much don't you. And then on the not so much plot side, but more character side, I think what's interesting to me always as an adult reader and as a reader of middle grade is the psychological side. So why would someone commit a crime like that? What would drive you to do that? And as a mystery writer, if you want to make the story compelling, it has to be a good reason. That motive has to be strong. So that's something that is fun from a writer side and from a reader side, I think.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I love that you said you can't give away too much, because that brings me to our next question, which is, in middle grade mystery and adventure, a common trait that characters hold is their bravery or boldness. Without revealing too much, can you tell us how one or more of the characters in your stories exemplify braveness or bravery? Brianna, do you want to start it off this time?
Sure. I think bravery is a pretty common theme in these books, so it's definitely something that comes up and is really explicitly explored in Pepper. Pepper herself is the kind of character who runs headfirst into danger, anything that means that is fun for her, and she's really passionate about going after clues because she has a personal tie to wanting to be a detective. Her mother was a professional detective and she wants to follow in her footsteps, but she can be a little bit reckless sometimes, a little bit too determined. Her friend Jacob, who you can see on the cover right here, is a little bit more reserved, but kind of has to come along with her on her adventures to make sure she doesn't get into too much trouble and keep her in check as well. So I think there's definitely bravery in those characters, but also how characters use bravery, I think, is important too. What situations are they pushing themselves into that maybe they're not relying on others the way they should? Why might a character be closed off? Pepper herself feels like she has to do everything by herself to prove that she can be as good as her mother was. And I explore LGBTQ themes in the book as well. So she feels like she needs to prove that she's always right in order for people to take her seriously, including as she's exploring her sexuality. She wants to be taken seriously as well. So I think it's kind of two-sided. We have brave characters who want to go after these things, but we also have to explore what bravery means and what the limits of that are and what emotional bravery is too. And that's fun to explore in this genre specifically.
Awesome. What about you, George? Oh, wait, you're on mute.
Sorry about that.
You're good.
In 2021, I think the most kind of brave thing you can do is just be yourself, because there are so many kind of pressures tugging at you in different directions, from social media, from your friends, from school even. And I think that, just learning to love who you are and be yourself is the most brave thing that any kid can kind of do. So Shad is really unapologetic about who he is. He loves baking, alchemy, his grandmother, and just using all those things and his passions and never faltering really enable him to drive the story in a way that I was really excited to follow along for the journey. So just that lack of concern for, what other people are thinking of me. It's funny at times, but other time, I think most of the time it's really endearing, and so that's what I think allows Shad to really stand out and be, a brave main character, a brave protagonist.
What about you, Melanie?
In this latest book, Every Missing Key, it's about a girl named Maddie, who's 11 years old, and she is the type of hold on just a second here. Let's see if this is better. She is the type of kid who worries about things going wrong. I was that kind of kid. Like I was very nervous about a lot of things and anxious. And she's kind of gotten a reputation for crying wolf about things in her community. And a new boy moves into her neighborhood, and she becomes convinced that he's really a child who went missing 6 months earlier. So in Maddie's story, she's kind of dealing with her anxiety and how the adults make assumptions about her and her behavior when trying to navigate this mystery and potentially help this child. So for me, I think she's pretty brave because she's still willing to put herself out there and risk getting that kind of negative feedback from adults about being an anxious child, which is kind of what a lot of us experience, I think. So I think they're all brave in a way. It's really interesting to hear how everybody has a different angle on it.
Yeah. And what about you, Claire?
I think what's interesting is that we're talking so much about character, where there's also that plot element, and it's the balance of the two that's so fun. In Midnight at the Barclay Hotel, three kids are trying to solve the mystery of the murder of Mr. Barclay. So pretty serious stuff. And there's a murderer in the hotel with them. So the setting of the hotel, or the setting of the stories in a hotel, a secluded location, nobody can leave. So there's that plot danger, of course, of the pushback from who the killer is, which we're trying to figure out. But there's also that character element, which part of it, a part of the theme that I tried to use was truth. So as far as, because everyone is lying, obviously all the suspects are lying, but the kids are also each having a secret. And I remember when I was that age that sometimes you were keeping something from your parents that, to me now as an adult, doesn't seem that big of a deal, but at the time it felt so big. And I think as a middle grade author, it's so important to try to remember what it felt like to be 12, what it felt like to have those emotions, and like Brianna and George were alluding to, the identity part, like who are you and what is it that you want to be, whether, on all these different levels, so, which makes it such a great genre to write for, because you can A, be 12 again, and B, you can sort of go into that mindset of discovery and figuring out who you are. And that's brave.
Yeah, I love that. I'm so happy right now. Like, as a middle school teacher, you're saying everything I want to hear. Okay, next question. So I feel like setting is a really big, important part of like mystery and adventure. So how important is the setting of y'all's stories? Is there a specific reason y'all chose like the time and place that your stories like take place? So Melanie, do you want to start us off this time?
Yeah, sure. So Every Missing Piece is set in North Carolina, which is where I grew up. And it's set in a small town. And that was a very purposeful choice, not only because I got to write I get to sprinkle Easter eggs from my childhood throughout the book, but I wanted it to be in a small town community that kind of operates on its own rules. When you're in a really close-knit, small area, there's the law, and then there's what people are going to do. And so that area, that gray area of morality, is very interesting to me. And it was when I was a kid too. You wanted to understand, why are people doing these? Why did they make that choice? And why did they make that choice? And so I think we're still exploring the same thing as adults, trying to figure out why people do things that they do. So being in the small town allowed me to do a lot of things with the plot that really made it work and examine those areas. So it was very purposeful setting it there.
Yeah. What about you, George?
Sure. Yeah, my story is not in the U.S. Well, it is in part actually, but we quickly go to kind of this like updated Library of Alexandria in the Middle East, and so I wanted to give kids a flavor of kind of where I'm from, which is Lebanon and the countries around Lebanon, and give them some culture in that regard if they haven't been exposed to it. I really love when books take me to places I've never been, both plot-wise and really with the setting. And so I wanted the setting to be almost its own character, where it's just a school, but it's like surrounded by books, like in all the hallways, everywhere there are bookshelves, and they're kind of coming off the place if there's like a fight. Books are flying everywhere, and so I really wanted kids to kind of get that immersion somewhere where they again might be outside their comfort zone. I think that's one thing that stories can do really well. Also, it's contemporary, so I chose kind of the modern day because I think that there are timeless issues that can be explored in story, and I wanted to explore those both in terms of how characters from the past have dealt with them moving forward, and how characters today deal with them, and how really the decisions we make are not too different than the decisions that might have been made 20 or 30 years ago, or even longer. So both those reasons are kind of why I chose contemporary, but also a fantastical setting. And I think that being able to go somewhere also takes a load off your back, because if you're reading a book to escape, and that's primarily why I personally read, it's just a huge relief to be able to go somewhere else, not have to worry about the issues in your hometown, and just have a good time.
Awesome. What about you, Fleur?
So my setting is based, it's at a hotel secluded in Estes Park, Colorado. We're a town that's modeled after that. And it's kind of modeled after the Stanley Hotel, which I visited. I did a ghost hunting tour. Like, man, this place is cool. But in order for it to work within the story, I had to set it, or I had to create my own hotel, because the Stanley Hotel once upon a time was a secluded location, but now there's a town surrounding it. And I had to create a situation where no one could leave. So I'm like, I'll put it on a Colorado mountain and let's have a blizzard and no one can leave for the weekend. So it created that sort of urgency and a little bit of an over the top value to it, kind of like what George is saying, is that the setting becomes a character, or like Melanie's talking about, like there's different rules for the place, and it makes it feel a little bit, you're trying to figure out all the whys and why are people behaving, and it's challenging your characters. So definitely for me, for all my books, always setting is basically its own character, which is super fun. And it's fun when you can make it your own place and you can use your imagination. So I try to model it after a real place, but not make it the real place, because I'm afraid I'll get it wrong. So it's fun. I'm sorry, my cat is photobombing here.
I love cats. And Brianna.
Here's a Zoom thing going on. School visits too, and she shows up. So.
I love that. Brianna, where does Pepper live?
Yeah, I'm excited to be talking after Fleur, because I feel like we have a similar approach to setting in our debuts, and that our characters are kind of trapped in your case. Pepper's not trapped, but she's in a remote location. She's at, I don't know if you can see, but in her binoculars, you can see the mansion reflected that she's at where the murder occurs. So essentially, she's from Connecticut, but her great aunt has just passed, and she's going up to Maine to help with her dad and her aunt to settle the estate. But she's certain, of course, that great aunt Florence was murdered, and sets out not only to prove it, but to figure out who did it. And I think when I approached setting, it was definitely about how can I make the stakes higher in the story with the setting, kind of similar to what Fleur was saying. And in her case, her primary suspect is her Aunt Wendy, who she's living with. And her cousin Andrew is also on the case, but trying to prove that his mom's innocent, and they're all in the same house together. So not only does she have to solve the mystery, but she has to do it basically under the guardianship of her main suspect. It's also in a very remote area. The story doesn't leave the cul-de-sac, and all of the main suspects are kind of at the mansion, working at the mansion or nearby. And I think that's not only so that I could explore the setting a little bit deeper, but also I find I'm from cities. I currently live in New York City. I find remote woodsy areas a lot more scary, actually, because I'm from populated areas. So I think they're the perfect place for a mystery or adventure story.
Cool. Oh, okay. All right. So next question. Mystery and adventure stories are known for their plot twists. Did you experience any plot twists while writing those stories? Fleur, do you want to start off with this one, son?
Yeah, well, mine was actually really fun. I had set up all the characters, the setting, the whole Agatha Christie vibe, started writing, have my suspects. And then midway through, I figured out a plot twist for one of the characters, and I don't want to give it away because it's too much fun if you get a chance to read Midnight at the Barclay Hotel. But I'm like, man, I could do this. And then I thought, ooh, and want to tell everybody, and it's just your own inside joke almost. But it was awesome to then have it play out. It's really fun now to get letters from readers. The kids usually go, but I did not see this coming, the plot twist. And it's really fun as a writer. And afterward, now as an author, talking to kids to sort of have them give me my feedback on that plot twist, whether they saw it coming or not, which most of them don't, which just means I've done my job. But it's fun to sprinkle the clues. Then afterward, I thought, ooh, but now I'm going to have to make sure all the clues to the plot twists are there. And that, I think, is a job that I know that a lot of writers aren't always sure how to do. But that does, and it does take some skill to kind of put the breadcrumbs there. But it's really fun as a writer to put them in there. I'm sure everybody else will have their stories to tell.
I mean, we might have different definitions of fun because, like, my fun and adventure are very close. Well, for me, I had an idea of where my story was going. Like, I usually kind of know my ending, but I didn't know some of the whys behind the characters' actions until I was writing it. And every missing piece has a very big midpoint turn. There's a big twist that happens that kind of changes the way you see everything. And I didn't entirely know what was going to happen until I got there. My subconscious knew, but it didn't make it out until I got to that point in drafting. And it ended up, I had to go back and change a ton of stuff, of course. But once I figured out, I was like, oh, that's what happened. So I always like sharing that, especially with young readers, that a lot of times the story is just as much of a surprise to the author as it is to the reader. So it's definitely fun exploring and then doing all those drafts to get those plot points where they need to be. That's the hard work for sure.
What about you, Brianna? Any plot twists?
This is a hard question for me because I'm definitely a plotter rather than a pantser, so to speak. So like plotter, you plan everything out ahead of time. Pantsers, you write by the seat of your pants, so to speak. I'm definitely a plotter. I need everything in place. And then I fill it in with the like emotional arcs. So I think most of my plot twists were really character driven as opposed to plot driven because I knew what kind of plot twist I wanted early on. The thrills and twist of mystery are why I love it so much. So it's packed with those, and I always kind of saw them along the way. But my characters definitely surprised me along the way, how they evolved and changed, especially kind of like Melanie was saying, like side characters too. You have to figure out the motives for each of these characters. I think Fleur mentioned as well. And that was, what really pushed me as a writer to understand all of these characters who are on the peripherals of the story. And I feel like a lot of the twists came from those characters as opposed to the main cast.
What about you, George?
I could not be more distant from Brianna my approach. I think that Melanie and I actually find common ground here a lot. I'm a huge pantser, like true and true. It's why I love writing. I like to discover everything as I go. And one thing that I'm like super passionate about is the fact that when you are a pantser, you experience this writing like these emotional roller coasters along with your reader. And I think the art of writing is what allows you to take your reader where you're going as well. So there is plot, like going back to the fact that I have loved plot twists since I was a kid. There is plot twist after plot twist in my novel. There's a pretty big one in the middle, and then the climax is just a series of them. And that is the most fun part of writing, is tying all those strings at the end. And I think that for pantsers, and when you're doing anything, right, seeing all the hard work come to fruition and work itself out is really why I think storytelling is magical in a way, and it transcends kind of the medium of writing and what storytelling of any form. So it's just, I think that as a pantser, there are a lot of plot twists, and it's a lot of fun. My novel tends to be very lighthearted, so it's a good time. And I will say, if you're a reader, try and predict what's going to happen, and I hope that I can kind of surprise you.
I love that. Okay, so I've never heard these, like the pantser plotter thing. I think I might dedicate a bulletin board for in my classroom. I've never heard that before.
The person in between is a plantser. If you're like,
oh my gosh, stop! I did not know that.
I didn't know that one.
Because I like to write that early draft where I find out what I want to talk about, and then my first revision is really a whole plotting exercise where I'm getting it all in line and making it make sense. So I kind of do a little of both.
I love that. So this is going to be my first year teaching writing.
What do you do, Fleur? Are you a pantser, a plotter, or a plantser? Where are you?
Well, some of it depends. Like for Midnight at the Barclay Hotel, I did not know who the killer was going to be. I decided ahead of time, because a lot of it is basically an introduction to mystery. So the kids are figuring out motive, means, and opportunity, and they're acting like detectives. So I thought, well, a little bit like George, I'm like, I'll just figure it out along with the kids, and I'll set it up so everyone has equal motive, that everything is fair. So it's very difficult from the outset to figure out who did it, because I didn't know. So I wrote the whole thing, figured out as I got towards the end who the killer was, and then sprinkled the clues. But that said, as you work along, like for instance, I have to turn in things to my editor who wants to know what I'm going to be working on. So I can't say, well, I'm a pantser, so I don't know. I can't do that. So I have to have some sort of idea of where the story's going to go. So I'm much more a plotter now than I was in the beginning, like George. Sometimes it's great to discover the story, but sometimes it takes such a huge amount of editing at the back end. I can't really afford the amount of time on that anymore. So I have to become something of a plotter, but still a bit like you were mentioning, Melanie, the characters sometimes do stuff and things come, and of course it's from your own brain at the end of the day, but they become their own people in your head, and they start to do stuff where I'm like, oh, this is cool, or wait, what happened over here? And that's the magic that I think you're talking about, George, that is really the fun part.
I love that. Okay, so next year is going to be my first year teaching writing. So I kind of like drafted this question just for my kids because I'm going to show them this. But everyone always talks about like reluctant readers. Well, I had my same class, or for the most part, most of my class last year. So I'm actually moving up with the students I had. So last year I was in 6th grade teaching reading. Now I'm moving up teaching writing. So I don't feel like I had reluctant readers. But when I said we were going to be doing writing in 7th grade, my whole class was like, And I was like, why? It's so fun. So what advice would you give to my reluctant writers? Brianna, do you want to start us off just because you're a planner?
I love this question, because sometimes even I'm a reluctant writer because it's so intimidating, especially when someone's going to be reading it, which the classroom and knowing you're going to be passing it in to your teacher, that kind of mirrors the same thing we're doing, passing it into an editor, or knowing that readers are going to be judging us too. And you can have that critic in your head who tells you, don't even start because what you're going to put down isn't going to be good enough. So the biggest piece of advice I would give is to write bad and write often. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. There's so many times I've scrapped entire plots, entire characters, entire chapters, but I learned so much through that it makes my writing so much stronger in the end. And just being open to feedback. Feedback's not criticism. It's someone engaging with your work and getting excited about something that they see potential in.
What about you, George?
Yeah, Brianna, that was such good advice. I would say find what you love to write. I mean, and everything. Find what you love to do, right? So find what you love to write, whether it's poetry, short stories, mystery, romance, whatever it is. Experiment, find what that is, and it's going to make writing a whole lot more fun. Writing is not easy for anyone, and I think that in the case of a student, you might want to impress your classmates, but just really do what makes you happy. I mean, as a writer, I want to impress other writers and readers. And I think the key is not to try and think, okay, what do they want to read? No, it's what do I want to write? And when you're writing from like the soul, from what your passion is, I think that's going to show, and it's going to make a much more enjoyable experience. So just find that thing that you love and write about that.
Yeah. What about you, Melanie?
That's really good advice from George. You hear people talk about that, like write about what you love. And sometimes that was hard for me early on because I I love magic tricks and I love horses. And like I could think of kind of like subjects that I was interested in. And it took going through writing a couple of books for me to realize that what I was really trying to connect with is like a topic that I would want to argue about. Like if somebody had an opposing position to me on a topic, something to do with like in family issues, like a family struggle. In my first book, Counting Time, the family's dealing with their younger child having neuroblastoma, which is a cancer. And they're doing a very controversial treatment. And so there's a lot of opinions out there about whether or not it's right to do that treatment. And so for me, that was something I would probably get in an argument about. I'd have a strong opinion. So I look for those opinions because when you care about what the characters are saying, you want to write it because it's your own opinion is coming out through the characters. But the big piece of advice I like to give to kids is more related to what Brianna was saying. I was grabbing this out of my drawer. Writing is rewriting. This is what I always hold up on all of my school visits because people tend to ask about how do you write a book? And I say it's not a question of how do you write a book. It's how do you write that book 8 or 9 times, So just wanting to finish it once is the first step. And then you have to finish it again and again as you go through revisions all the way to copy edits and little fussy changes. So I like to show the students that. I have like a whole stack of manuscripts for each book and I show them it's this many thousands of pages and that's what made this one book, is that I had to do all of those. So I try to reassure them that the only thing that's guaranteed is you're not going to write it perfect the first time. Never. So you don't have to worry about it because it's not going to be perfect. You're going to plan on rewriting it. You're going to plan on some revision. And so I try to really emphasize that with kids because they can feel like it's like a personal failure that they didn't get it exactly right. But it's not. That's just the way writing goes.
Yeah. What about you, Fleur? Any advice?
I think everyone has said it perfectly. Particularly the rewriting part. I do a lot of school visits, and the kids and the teachers usually go, "Can you please tell the kids that they need to edit?" And it is a bit that magic that we're talking about is really fun. When you're writing a story and you're sort of like, "Man, this is awesome," and then you go back a little while later, and we're all professional writers, so then you're going, "It's not that awesome." And then you have to go back and you have to, do all the things we just talked about. If it's a mystery, you have to plant the clues. If the characters aren't behaving in a way that they should be behaving, or there's boring scenes at the kitchen table, you have to take those out. There's a lot of editing involved. And Melanie's right. It is a stack that big. But I don't want that to deter the kids as far as the amount of work, because they're not writing a book. They will most likely be writing a story. So focus on, trying to make that better. And like Brianna said, the feedback, using that and making the story better. It really does, when you're reading a book or a short story that seems really perfect to you and seems effortless, that's the author's job is to go through that story 10, 20 times and make it the best it can be. And kids can do the same. And you start to, in the beginning, I didn't enjoy that all that much. I enjoyed the magic part that George was talking about, where you find in the story, and that's the fun part. But now I'm actually at the point where I'm happy when that first magic draft is done, and I can go back and I can mold it into what I want it to be. So hopefully the kids, as you start teaching, Cierra, will start to pick up on that too, and start to enjoy the editing process, the rewriting.
Yeah, I hope so. Okay, so Melanie, I really want you to answer this question first.
Okay.
What do you hope the readers get out of your book, or everyone's book? But I want you to answer first.
So can you say that again?
First, what do you hope the readers are going to get out of your book?
What do I hope the readers are going to get out of my book? Well, with Maddie's story and Every Missing Piece, I hope that kids take away from this that it's normal to have some anxiety sometimes, and that's something that a lot of people deal with, and that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with you. It's just who you are. It's your own personal operating manual. We each have our own operating manual, and they're each a little different. And so I like showing how Maddie deals with things and how they're approaching that with her family. And I hope that gives kids a sense of reassurance. But I also hope they're just like, darn, that was a good story. Like that's really what I'm going for. At the end, I want them to say they didn't see it all coming, and that it was a really fun read, and that they would want to read it again. That's my goal, certainly as an author, is entertainment.
I love that. George, what would you like for the students to get out of your book, or just audience in general?
Yeah, I mean, students, adults, being yourself is your greatest superpower. Whatever the magic is in your world, there's magic, there's alchemy, right, in my character's world. But Shad's superpower is being who he is, and that's what makes him such an effective alchemist. And so just being yourself, whether you're an adult or a kid, being true to that and finding what you love and doing it in any way you can, that is really what I want to bring out, because life is too short, and I think that's a big theme in my book. And just do what you want, be silly, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. What about you, Brianna?
I think a lot of Pepper's story is about her learning to embrace change. She's following in the footsteps of her mother, who's a detective, but the rules don't always apply. She has to confront things on her own and figure out who she is, and kind of like George was saying, just be okay with who she is as well. And kind of along those lines, with Pepper exploring possibly being someone who has a crush on a girl and a boy, and her best friend Jacob being transgender. I really want Pepper's story to be one that kids can see themselves in, not only see their identities represented, but see characters who share their identities just being heroes and having fun and having action-packed great scenes and going on adventures. I think that's really important and what I was missing as a young reader. So I really hope that Pepper and Jacob's story creates that space for readers today.
And Fleur, what about you?
Wow, it's really twofold. So I set out to write that introduction to mystery, which I'm hoping kids get out of that, that they love mysteries too, or hopefully they just love to read. It's really a book for reluctant readers or kids that maybe don't like to read so much, or struggling readers, to make it accessible. And then on the flip side, also on the more character level that the other authors have talked about truth, true to yourself, or telling the truth, that sometimes, even though it's really, really hard and it's something that you're carrying around and it feels this big, it's better to tell the truth and to be honest about whatever it is that's going on, and whether that's about who you are or something that maybe you're afraid to tell an adult in your life, that it's okay to tell the truth. So it's a little bit of both. A lot of times you set out to be, particularly as a mystery writer, that was not, sometimes the character things come secondary as the story develops. But I hope kids get both out of that.
Awesome. Okay, so my last and final question for y'all. What is next? Do y'all have any books coming out? Are you drafting a book right now? Fleur, do you want to start off this time?
Yeah, so next summer, I have another mystery coming out, a little bit spookier than this story's also got some ghost elements in it. The one coming up next year is called Daybreak on Raven Island, and it's super spooky, set on kind of an Alcatraz type setting. And then Midnight at the Barclay Hotel is coming out in August, at the end of August, in paperback. So that's kind of exciting too, because I love paperbacks. So that's next week.
Love that. Really excited.
Yeah.
Brianna, what about you?
I also love paperback, so I'm excited that Pepper is coming out in paperback at the end of September as well. But my sophomore novel will also be a middle grade adventure story coming out next summer. The title's still working, but it's currently called Finley, Walsh Adventure Agency. And Finley is an aspiring adventurer who's obsessed with other female adventurers in the past and wants to become one in the future. And over her spring break at school is staying with a relative in a small town where a famous adventurer went missing. And the town's obsessed with her story. It's very touristy and everything's themed after this adventurer. And she's convinced that she's going to be the one to rescue her and follow in her footsteps.
Oh, that's exciting. I love that. Yeah. Okay, Melanie, what about you? What's next?
My next middle grade is set in New Jersey, and it does have a strong mystery element again. It stars a boy this time, a boy with ADHD, which is something that's very close to me and my family. And we'll be announcing the title and the cover soon. We're very close. So I'm at the exciting part where you're seeing the page designs and the cover sketches and everything. So hopefully in the next couple months we'll release it. And I just want to say congratulations to those of you who are debuting and have gone through this process during the pandemic. That's a major accomplishment.
That's you, George. Shout out to you.
It's so fall 22 is a long way off. However, I will say, while I will make you wait the longest for my book, it's going to be very worth it. Shad's story is one that you definitely don't want to miss. But it is a series, and there's more fun to be had. So fall 2023, there's going to be a book 2. Still yet unannounced in terms of title and whatnot, but it's a lot of fun. I'm having a lot of fun drafting it. But book 1, I'm hoping that I can surprise all of you readers, and that you're really going to have a blast diving into the world of alchemy.
Super exciting. Okay, so just to wrap it up, does everyone want to drop like their Insta handle? Are they like TikTok? George, what's your Insta handle?
Yes, by George Jreije on Twitter and Instagram. Just by and then my full name. Find me, say hello. Always happy to interact.
Brianna?
It's at Brianna R. McDonald, so spelt how you can see down here, but with an R between Brianna and McDonald, and it's the same on Twitter and Instagram.
Cool. Melanie?
Oh, you muted.
Melanie Conklin, author on Instagram, and ML Conklin on Twitter. Twitter is the only space I'm in. I'm not a cool TikTok kid. I'm sorry. I'm skipping that bus completely.
And what about you, Fleur?
On Instagram, I'm Fleur Bradley, just as you see it. And on Twitter, I am FT Bradley author. So, because I had a book series before Midnight at the Barclay Hotel as FT Bradley. So that's why it's FT Bradley author on Twitter.
Awesome. And my Instagram handle is at one default teacher. It's spelled how it sounds. So, all right, this was really fun, you guys. This is awesome. Anyone want to say anything before we peace out?
I think it's time to wave goodbye.
Yeah. Keep reading,
Thank you all for this. This was great.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.